This 4-year-old beggar girl sees a millionaire's daughter being left on a deserted road, but she saw everything and does something that shocked everyone. Watch until the end. Comment. Telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The afternoon sun beat down on the hot asphalt of the highway winding through Cedar Creek as 4-year-old Lily shifted the small fruit basket in her skinny arms. Her faded clothes clung to her sweaty body, and her bare feet were already used to the heat of the ground. There, on that specific curve where the road climbed toward the wealthier neighborhoods of the North Carolina town, she spent every afternoon trying to sell a few oranges and bananas to the passing cars. The girl had learned that the drivers of the more expensive cars sometimes stopped, especially the women who wore dark sunglasses, and took pity on such a small child working alone. Lily didn't quite understand the concept of pity, but she knew that a few coins at the end of the day meant a plate of hot food. On that particular day, something in the air felt different. Maybe it was the way the clouds were gathering on the horizon, or the way the birds were flying lower than usual. Lily had a sharp intuition for these things, a sixth sense her grandmother used to say was a family gift before she passed away last winter. That's when the SUV appeared. It was one of those big, shiny SUVs, the kind Lily saw drive by but never stop for her fruit. The vehicle slowed down strangely, almost hesitantly, before coming to a complete stop a few yards ahead of where she stood. Lily watched curiously, hoping that maybe this time she'd get lucky with a different kind of customer. The driver's door opened, and a woman got out. She was blonde, wearing expensive clothes and mirrored sunglasses that reflected the late afternoon light. Lily noticed that her hands were trembling slightly as she walked to the back of the vehicle. There was something in the woman's posture that made the little girl's stomach churn, a tension in the air she couldn't name but felt deeply. The woman opened the rear door of the SUV and, to Lily's horror, pulled a girl of about her own age out of the car. The child wore a light pink dress, shiny leather shoes, and had her brown hair neatly combed. It was obvious she came from a wealthy family, very different from Lily. "Get out," the blonde woman said, her voice as cold as a blade cutting through the air. The girl in the pink dress was crying silently, her tears leaving clean streaks on her rosy cheeks. She looked at the woman with an expression of confusion and fear that broke Lily's heart. It was an expression the little fruit seller knew all too well, the expression of a child who didn't understand why the world was being cruel to her. "Please, don't leave me here," the girl in the pink dress murmured, her voice almost inaudible from the distance. The blonde woman didn't answer. Instead, she gave the child a shove, causing her to stumble and fall into the dust of the road. The pink dress immediately got stained with red dirt, and the girl let out a cry of pain and surprise that echoed through the surrounding mountains. Lily watched the scene in horror. Hidden behind a tree on the side of the road, her heart was beating so fast she was sure everyone could hear it. She wanted to scream, to run over and help the other girl, but something kept her paralyzed in place. The blonde woman looked at the child lying on the road for a moment that seemed to last an eternity. Then, without another word, she got back into the SUV. The engine roared to life, and the tires screeched on the asphalt as she sped away, disappearing up the road in a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes. The girl in the pink dress was left there, alone in the middle of the empty road, crying silently. Her small hands tried to wipe the dirt from her clothes, but they only spread more soil over the delicate fabric. She looked in the direction the SUV had vanished, as if expecting it to come back at any moment. Lily stayed hidden for a few minutes, processing what she had just witnessed. Her 4-year-old mind struggled to understand how a grown woman could do something so terrible to a child. In Lily's limited experience, adults were sometimes harsh or indifferent, but she had never seen anything so deliberately cruel. Finally, compassion overcame fear. Lily left her fruit basket in the shade of the tree and walked slowly toward the abandoned girl. Her steps were cautious, as if she were approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any moment. "Hi," Lily said softly when she was close enough. The girl in the pink dress looked up, revealing a face smeared with tears and dirt. Her eyes were large and frightened, a shade of brown that reminded Lily of melted chocolate. She didn't answer, just stared at Lily with an expression of pure terror. "I'm not going to hurt you," Lily continued, crouching down to be at the same height. "My name is Lily. What's yours?" The girl opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. She looked again in the direction the SUV had gone, then back at Lily, and finally down at her own dirty hands. "It's okay," Lily said, recognizing the other child's state of shock. "You don't have to talk right now." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected off the surrounding mountains. Lily knew it would be dark soon, and two little girls alone on the road wouldn't be safe. She had to make a decision, and fast. "Come with me," Lily said, holding out her hand. "I know a place where we can stay." The girl in the pink dress looked at the outstretched hand for a long moment. There must have been something in the kindness of Lily's eyes that touched some deep part of her wounded soul, because slowly she reached out her own hand and placed it in Lily's. The two girls walked together down the dusty road as night fell over Cedar Creek. Lily carried her fruit basket in one hand and held the other child's hand tightly with her other. She still didn't know the name of the girl she had decided to protect, didn't know where she came from or who the cruel woman was who had abandoned her. But one thing Lily knew with absolute certainty: she would never let another child suffer alone if she could help it. That decision, made by a 4-year-old girl in the middle of an empty road, would change the course of many lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The wooden shack behind the Cedar Creek Farmers Market wasn't much, but it was all Lily had. Built from ill-fitting planks and covered with a tin roof that rattled in the wind, it served as a storage space for leftover fruits and vegetables that the vendors couldn't sell. Lily had discovered the place a few weeks after her grandmother passed, when she realized she needed better shelter than the cardboard box where she slept under the church awning. That night, careful not to make any noise, she led the girl in the pink dress through the dark alleys until they reached her secret refuge. The faint light from a distant streetlight barely illuminated the inside of the shack, but it was enough to show the small space Lily had organized. A few torn blankets spread on the floor, an old can that served as a water container, and a few pieces of stale bread stored in a plastic bag. The unknown girl stood at the entrance, her large eyes taking in everything with a mixture of fear and fascination. It was obvious she had never seen a place like this. Her expensive, clean clothes contrasted sharply with the raw simplicity of the environment. "You can come in," Lily said softly, pulling her by the hand. "It's safe here." Once they were inside, Lily closed the makeshift door made from a loose plank. The silence that followed was broken only by the nocturnal sounds of the town in the distance and the uneven breathing of the traumatized girl. "Are you hungry?" Lily asked, offering a piece of the bread she had saved. The girl looked at the food with a strange expression, as if she had never seen that kind of bread before. It was clear she was used to very different food. Still, after a few seconds of hesitation, she took the offered piece and began to eat slowly, chewing carefully. It was then that Lily noticed something worrying. The girl had only taken 2 bites when her face began to turn red. Small blotches appeared on her cheeks, and she brought her hands to her neck, starting to cough. "What's happening?" Lily murmured, alarmed. The other child's breathing became difficult and noisy. Her hands trembled as she dropped the piece of bread, which fell to the dusty floor. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of physical panic. Lily had seen something similar before. Her grandmother had told her about people who got sick when they ate certain things. An allergy, she had called it, explaining that some bodies rejected certain foods as if they were poison. Without hesitating, Lily ran to her can of water and offered it to the girl. "Here," she said urgently, "drink a lot." The water seemed to help a little. The labored breathing gradually subsided, and the red blotches on her face began to fade, but the scare had left both girls shaken. The stranger curled up in a corner of the shack, hugging her knees to her chest. "I'm sorry," Lily said, genuinely worried. "I didn't know you couldn't eat bread." The girl looked at her for a long moment, then pointed to her own chest and shook her head. It was a simple communication, but Lily understood. She was saying her body couldn't handle that kind of food. "Okay," Lily said, thinking quickly, "I'll figure out what you can eat." That night, the two girls slept side by side on the torn blankets, with Lily staying awake for long periods to make sure her new companion was breathing normally. The rain began before midnight, pounding on the tin roof and creating small leaks that dripped into cans scattered around the shack. The chill of the Appalachian Mountains seeped through the cracks in the walls, making the two children huddle together for warmth. Lily noticed that the unknown girl shivered much more than she did, probably because she wasn't used to this kind of discomfort. The next morning, Lily woke to the first rays of sun filtering through the ill-fitting planks. The girl beside her was still asleep, but her sleep was restless. She murmured incomprehensible words, and every so often her body would twitch, as if she were reliving some terrible moment. Lily slipped silently out of the shack to get fresh water from a public spigot near the market. The morning hustle had already begun. Vendors arriving with their produce, merchants opening their stalls, the aroma of fresh coffee mixing with the smell of ripe fruit. Miss Connie, a woman who had been selling vegetables at the market for over 20 years, waved to Lily as she passed with her can of water. "Morning, little one," the woman said with a kind smile. "How are you?" "Morning, Miss Connie," Lily replied politely. "I'm okay." "You look tired. Didn't sleep well." Lily hesitated. Miss Connie had always been kind to her, sometimes offering a piece of fruit or cheese when she had extra. But the girl knew she couldn't tell her about her new companion. Adults would ask questions, and questions led to trouble. "Just had a weird dream," Lily lied, forcing a smile. When she returned to the shack, she found the unknown girl awake, sitting in the same corner where she had huddled the night before. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying all night. "Good morning," Lily said softly, offering the fresh water. The girl drank greedily as if she hadn't had a drink in a long time. When she finished, she looked at Lily and pointed to herself, then made a motion with her hands that seemed to indicate drawing. Lily was confused for a moment until the girl picked up a small twig that had fallen near the door and began to draw in the dirt floor. With careful movements, she traced lines that formed a figure, a large house with many windows and a garden in front. "Your house?" Lily asked, pointing to the drawing. The girl nodded vigorously, then drew two figures next to the house, one large and one small. She pointed to the small figure and then to herself. "You and your dad?" Lily guessed. Again, a positive nod. But then the girl drew another figure, this one with long, wavy hair, and her expression changed completely. Her face contorted with fear, and she violently scribbled over the figure, erasing it from the dirt. Lily understood immediately. The erased figure represented the blonde woman who had abandoned the girl on the road. "Did she hurt you?" Lily asked gently. The answer came in the form of more silent tears streaming down the girl's face. She hugged her knees again, rocking her body back and forth in a motion Lily recognized as an attempt to self-soothe. In the days that followed, Lily developed a careful routine. Early in the morning, she would go out to sell fruit and beg for a few coins, always leaving fresh water and some safe food for her companion. She had discovered through trial and error that the girl could eat ripe bananas but not apples. She could drink water, but milk made her face swell. Honey was safe, but any kind of bread or crackers caused the dreaded red blotches and difficulty breathing. Careful observation became second nature to Lily. She noticed that the girl was afraid of loud male voices, that she would hide whenever she heard heavy footsteps approaching. She also noticed that she had recurring nightmares that made her wake up with a start, calling for Daddy in desperate whispers. But perhaps the most disturbing observation was the discovery of the marks. On the third day, while helping the girl wash with a damp cloth, Lily saw small scars on her arm, round uniform marks that looked like they had been made on purpose. Lily didn't need to be an adult to understand that those marks were not from accidents. Someone had deliberately hurt this helpless child, probably the same woman who had abandoned her on the road. That night, as the two girls prepared to sleep, Lily made a decision that would change the course of the next few months. She would not only protect her new companion, she would heal her. Her grandmother had taught her about plants that helped wounds heal and teas that soothed nightmares. It was time to put that knowledge into practice. "Tomorrow, I'm going to teach you about plants," Lily whispered in the darkness. "My grandma always said that nature has a cure for everything." The response came in the form of a small, warm hand seeking hers under the blanket. It was the first time the unknown girl had initiated any kind of physical contact, but what Lily didn't know was that with each passing day, the desperate search for a missing girl was intensifying throughout the region, and that very soon this search would reach the small farmers market in Cedar Creek. 2 weeks had passed since that afternoon on the road, and Lily had become an expert in survival for two. Each morning brought new challenges that tested her ability to protect the girl whose name she still didn't know, but whom she already considered a sister. The communication between them had evolved into a complex system of gestures, drawings in the dirt, and facial expressions. The girl in the pink dress, now wearing simple clothes Lily had managed to beg for, showed a surprising intelligence for solving problems without words. When she wanted to indicate she was thirsty, she would touch her lips and point to the water can. When she felt pain, she would place her hand on the spot and make a specific grimace that Lily had learned to interpret. But it was during the third week that the true gravity of the situation was revealed. Lily had gone out to the market earlier than usual, hoping to get some fruit that was starting to spoil before it was thrown away. The morning crowd was more intense than usual, with a strange buzz in the air that she couldn't identify. That's when she saw the man. He was tall, wearing expensive but simple clothes, and had an expression on his face that Lily recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who had lost something very important. His eyes scanned every stall, every corner of the market, with a desperate intensity that made the girl's heart race. The man held a piece of paper in his hand, showing it to every vendor he met. Lily couldn't see what was on the paper from that distance, but people's reactions were always the same: a shake of the head, a look of pity, and often a kind word of encouragement. "Mr. Arthur, I'm so sorry," said Miss Connie as the man approached her stall. "I haven't seen any child like that around here." The name hit Lily like a lightning bolt. Arthur. She had heard that name a few times at the market, always spoken with a mixture of respect and admiration. He was one of the wealthiest men in the region, owner of several lodges that catered to tourists who came for the natural beauty of the area. "Are you sure?" the man asked, and his voice carried a deep pain that made Lily's chest tighten. "Anything, any clue. She's all I have." Miss Connie took the paper from his hands and studied it carefully. Lily struggled to get closer without being noticed, and when she finally managed to see the paper, Her blood ran cold. It was a photo of the girl who was hiding in her shack. The image showed a smiling child, with neatly combed hair and the same pink dress that was now dirty and torn from the day of the abandonment. Below the photo, in large letters, was written, "Missing Clara Templeton, 4 years old, disappeared 15 days ago." Clara. Finally, Lily knew the name of the girl she had chosen to protect. "She disappeared when she was with her stepmother," Arthur continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Rebecca said they went to the park and Clara just vanished. The police are investigating, but—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lily could see the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands trembled as he held his daughter's photo. "We'll keep an eye out, Mr. Arthur," Miss Connie promised. "If she shows up around here, we'll let you know immediately." After the man walked away, Lily remained hidden behind a stack of wooden crates, processing what she had just discovered. Clara had a father who loved her desperately, a father who was searching for her with a heart-wrenching dedication. But if he had been searching for 15 days, why had the blonde woman, Rebecca, the stepmother, lied about what really happened? Why didn't she tell him she had abandoned Clara on the road? The confusion in Lily's mind was overwhelming. Her whole life, she had learned that adults were complicated and not always trustworthy, but this was beyond her comprehension. How could a mother, even a stepmother, do something so terrible and then pretend she didn't know what had happened? When she returned to the shack, she found Clara drawing in the dirt as she always did when she was alone. But this time, the drawing was different. It was a figure of a tall man, and next to him, Clara had drawn herself running toward him with open arms. "Your daddy?" Lily asked softly, pointing to the male figure. Clara nodded vigorously, and for the first time since Lily had known her, a flash of genuine happiness appeared in her eyes. The girl pointed to the drawing, then to herself, and made a gesture that clearly meant love. Lily's heart broke. Clara loved her father and missed him. She probably didn't understand why he wasn't coming to save her, why she was alone and scared in a damp shack instead of being home, safe and protected. At that moment, Lily made the hardest decision of her young life. She knew where Clara's father was. She knew he was desperately looking for her. One word from her, and Clara would be back home, in the comfort and safety she deserved. But she also knew that if she told the truth about what she saw on the road, she would have to explain why she had kept it a secret for so long. Adults would ask difficult questions, and Lily wasn't sure she could make them understand her motives. Besides, there was something deeper to consider. In Clara's drawings, the stepmother always appeared as a dark, threatening figure. If Rebecca had abandoned the girl once and then lied about it, what would stop her from doing something worse if Clara returned home? "I'll protect you," Lily whispered, gently touching Clara's hand. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Clara looked at her with those large, trusting eyes, and Lily felt the weight of responsibility settle on her small shoulders. It was a responsibility too great for a 4-year-old, but she had learned early in life that sometimes you have no choice but to be stronger than your age suggests. In the days that followed, Lily noticed subtle changes in Clara's behavior. The girl was more alert, as if she too had sensed that something had changed. She drew less and slept worse, waking up more frequently during the night. It was during one of these restless nights that Clara did something that completely surprised Lily. She quietly got up from her blanket and went to the wall of the shack where there was a small crack between the planks. She put her eye to the crack and watched something outside for several minutes. Curious, Lily went over and looked too. Outside, she could see a man walking slowly among the market stalls, even though it was late at night. He was carrying a flashlight and seemed to be looking for something or someone. "He's looking for me," Clara whispered, and Lily almost fainted with surprise. They were the first words she had heard Clara speak since she met her. Her voice was small and raspy, as if it hadn't been used in a long time, but it was clear and understandable. You can talk?" Lily asked, still in shock. Clara turned to her with tears in her eyes. "I can, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I talk, she'll find me. She always said she would hurt me if I told anyone about the bad things she did." Lily felt a rage build in her chest, an emotion so intense it surprised her. How could someone be so cruel to a child? How could they use fear and threats to keep a 4-year-old girl silent about her own suffering? "She won't find you here," Lily promised, "and you can talk to me whenever you want. I'll never tell anyone if you don't want me to." Clara studied her for a long moment, as if assessing whether she could trust this promise. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Lily," she said, and the sound of her own name on the lips of the girl she had saved made Lily feel a happiness she hadn't experienced in a long time. But the happiness was short-lived. The man outside was getting closer to their shack, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a shining blade, and Lily realized, with a chill in her stomach, that it wasn't Arthur who was looking for them. It was another man, someone she had never seen before, and there was something in his posture and the deliberate way he moved that filled her with dread. The two girls crouched away from the crack, barely daring to breathe, as the footsteps drew ever closer to their hiding place. The man stood right outside the shack for long enough for Lily to feel every beat of her heart echo in her ears. Her hands were cold despite the warm North Carolina night, and she held her breath until her lungs ached. Beside her, Clara had curled up so tightly she looked like a small shadow against the wooden wall. Through the crack between the planks, Lily could only see the flashlight beam moving back and forth, investigating every corner of the area around the market. The beam swept past the shack's door several times, and on each occasion, the two girls shrank back even further, praying silently not to be discovered. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps began to move away, but Lily didn't dare move until the sound had completely faded into the distance. When she finally relaxed, she realized her whole body ached with tension. "Who was that man?" Clara whispered, her voice still trembling with fear. "I don't know," Lily answered honestly, "but he was looking for something." The next morning, the market was even more agitated than usual. Lily noticed groups of people talking in whispers, worried glances exchanged between vendors, and a general atmosphere of unease that made her nervous. It was Miss Connie who explained what was happening. "A private detective showed up here last night," the woman said as she arranged her vegetables. "A guy named Jack. Said he was hired by Mr. Arthur to investigate his daughter's disappearance." Lily felt her stomach churn. The man with the flashlight wasn't just a curious stranger. He was a professional investigator, specifically looking for Clara. "Did he ask a lot of questions?" she managed to ask, trying to keep her voice casual. "A lot," Miss Connie confirmed with a sigh. "Wanted to know if anyone had seen any new children around, if we'd noticed any strange behavior, things like that. Poor man. He must be desperate to take this case." "Why desperate?" "Because everyone knows that when a child disappears without a trace for this long." Miss Connie didn't finish the sentence, but Lily understood the grim implication. For the rest of the day, Lily was extremely vigilant. Every person who passed near the market area was watched with suspicion. Every conversation analyzed for signs that someone might be looking for two hidden girls. When she returned to the shack late in the afternoon, she found Clara in a state of panic. The girl was huddled in a corner, trembling violently, and had thrown up in one of the cans Lily used to collect rainwater. "What happened?" Lily asked, immediately concerned. Clara pointed to the opposite wall of the shack with a trembling hand. Following the direction of her finger, Lily saw something that made her blood run cold. Someone had written something on the wood. No, not written, scratched forcefully, as if it were a message left in a hurry. The words were simple, but their meaning was terrifying. "I know you're in here." "When did this appear?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "After you left," Clara said between sobs. "I heard footsteps outside, then a noise like someone was scratching the wood. I stayed very quiet, but whoever it was knew I was here." Lily looked at the marks on the wall more closely. They had been made with something sharp, probably a knife or a nail, and the force used to create the letters had left splinters of wood scattered on the floor. But there was something even more disturbing. Next to the message, someone had drawn a symbol, a circle with a line through it, like a prohibited or cancelled sign. "We have to get out of here," Lily said, making the decision instantly. "Where to?" Clara asked, her large eyes filled with terror. Lily thought quickly. She knew other places in town where they could hide temporarily, but they all had risks. The cemetery was too isolated and too spooky for a 4-year-old. The church had too many visitors during the day. The bus station was watched. "The bridge," she said finally. "Under the old bridge, there's a space where no one goes." They quickly gathered the few possessions they had, the blankets, the water can, a few pieces of food Lily had managed to get during the day. It wasn't much, but it was all they owned in the world. As they left the shack, Lily was careful to erase any evidence that they had been there. She spread dust over the marks their blankets had left on the floor, rearranged some empty boxes so the space looked unoccupied. But as they did so, she couldn't help but look back several times at the threatening message on the wall. Who had written it? The investigator, Jack? Or someone more sinister? The walk to the bridge was tense. Lily chose a path through the darkest and least traveled alleys of Cedar Creek, constantly looking over her shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. Clara walked silently beside her, carrying her share of their belongings without complaint. But Lily could see that the girl was too scared to speak, even now that she had regained her ability to communicate verbally. The space under the bridge was even more precarious than the shack. It was damp, smelled of mold, and the sound of the water rushing below created a constant echo that would mask their conversations, but also make it hard to hear if anyone approached. "It's temporary," Lily said, trying to sound more confident than she really felt. "Just until we find out who's looking for us." Clara nodded, but her eyes were glazed over, as if she were mentally detaching from the reality around her. Lily had seen that expression before, in the first few days after the abandonment. It was Clara's way of coping with situations that were too emotionally overwhelming to process. That night, as they tried to sleep in their new hiding spot, Clara began to talk for the first time about her life before the abandonment. "She would burn my things," she whispered in the darkness. "My toys, my books, my favorite clothes. She said they were too good for a bad girl like me." Lily felt tears sting her eyes. "You're not bad, Clara. You're the bravest girl I know." "She also burned my arm," Clara continued, unconsciously touching the small scars Lily had noticed. "With cigarettes. She said it was to help me remember to keep quiet about our special secrets." The rage Lily felt in that moment was so intense she had to clench her fists to keep from screaming. How could anyone be so monstrous to a child? How could Rebecca sleep at night knowing what she did to Clara? "Why didn't your dad know?" Lily asked softly. "She was very smart," Clara explained. "She only hurt me in places no one could see. And always when Dad was away on business trips, when he came back, she'd pretend to be the best stepmother in the world. And you never told him." Clara shook her head sadly. "She said if I told, Dad would get so angry he'd never want to see me again. She said no one would believe me anyway because I was just a little liar." Lily then understood the terrifying complexity of the situation. Rebecca hadn't just physically abused Clara. She had psychologically manipulated the girl, creating a system of fear and guilt that kept her silent about her own suffering. But now another problem was developing. In recent days, Lily had noticed that Clara had a frequent cough, and her forehead was sometimes hot to the touch. The cold and dampness of their makeshift shelters were starting to affect the girl's health, and if Clara got really sick, Lily would have no choice but to seek medical help, which would inevitably lead to questions she wasn't prepared to answer. As she listened to Clara finally fall asleep, breathing with difficulty due to her worsening cough, Lily realized she was approaching a point of no return. Soon she would have to make decisions that could change everything, for better or for worse. Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed from the bridge above them, and Lily held her breath, wondering if the investigator Jack had discovered their new hiding place. The answer would come much sooner than she imagined. Clara's cough worsened dramatically during their second night under the bridge. What had started as a mild irritation turned into violent fits that left the girl breathless, her face turning red and her eyes filling with tears of effort. Lily was terrified. She had cared for herself when she got sick, using the home remedies her grandmother had taught her. But she had never dealt with something so intense in someone else. The herbal teas she knew for coughs weren't working, and the fever that accompanied the episodes was making Clara weaker and weaker. "It hurts here," Clara whispered during a pause between coughing fits, touching her chest with a small, trembling hand. Lily placed her hand on her friend's forehead and felt the heat radiating from it as if from a small furnace. Her skin was damp with sweat, but Clara was shivering as if she were very cold. "I'll get some fresh water," Lily said, trying to stay calm, "and I'll see if I can find some eucalyptus leaves. My grandma said they're good for breathing." But when she emerged from under the bridge to seek help, Lily discovered she had a much bigger problem than she had imagined. The surrounding area was being watched. Hidden behind a tree near the riverbank, she could see a man standing in the middle of the bridge, looking directly at the space where they were hidden. It wasn't the same man with the flashlight from the other night. This one was younger, wore simpler clothes, but there was something in his posture that screamed investigator. Jack! It had to be him. The man remained on the bridge for nearly an hour, sometimes pacing back and forth, sometimes standing completely still, as if listening for a specific sound. Lily realized with growing horror that he was probably trying to detect the sounds of Clara's cough, which echoed from under the bridge even when she tried to muffle them. When Jack finally moved away, Lily rushed back to Clara, only to find the situation even worse. The girl was delirious with fever, talking to people who weren't there and calling for her father in a hoarse, desperate voice. "Daddy, please come get me," she murmured, tossing restlessly on the damp blankets. "She's going to hurt me again if you don't come." Lily's heart broke hearing those words. For the first time since she had made the decision to protect Clara, she began to question if she was doing the right thing. The girl was sick, possibly seriously, and needed medical care that Lily couldn't provide. But if she took her to a hospital, if she told the truth about what she had seen on the road, what would happen next? Would Rebecca find out where Clara was and find a way to silence her forever? Or worse, would she manage to convince everyone that Clara was lying about the abuse? During the third night under the bridge, the situation reached a critical point. Clara had spent hours in a feverish state, her breathing becoming more and more labored. Lily had tried everything she knew, damp cloths on her forehead, tea made from leaves she found on the riverbank, even humming the songs her grandmother used to soothe her when she was little. Nothing worked. It was then that she heard voices approaching the bridge. "I'm sure I heard something down here yesterday," a male voice she recognized as Jack's was saying, sounds that seemed to come from a sick child. "But we've already checked 3 times, another voice replied, this one younger and more impatient. "There's nothing but trash and dirty water." Lily held her breath, hugging Clara to her chest and praying silently that the girl wouldn't have another coughing fit right at that moment. "Wait," Jack said, and the tone of his voice changed completely. "Look here." Lily heard footsteps approaching the spot where they were hidden. Through a crack between the stones that formed the base of the bridge, she could see the legs of two men walking slowly toward them. "Small footprints in the mud," Jack continued. "Recent, and look at this, pieces of cloth that looked like they were used as bandages." Lily's heart stopped. She had forgotten to hide the cloth she had used to try to bring down Clara's fever. In her desperation to care for her friend, she had left obvious evidence of their presence. "And there's more," said the second voice, now more interested. "There's a small fire pit over there. The ashes are still warm." At that moment, Clara began to stir restlessly in Lily's arms. Her breathing was getting harder, and small moans of pain began to escape her lips. "Did you hear that?" Jack asked, his voice suddenly alert. "I heard it. It came from under there." The footsteps got even closer, and Lily knew they had only a few seconds before being discovered. She looked at Clara, who was clearly too sick to run, and made the hardest decision of her life. She couldn't keep putting Clara's health at risk because of her own fears. Taking a deep breath, Lily emerged from their hiding place, carrying Clara in her arms. "Please," she said, looking directly at Jack. "She needs a doctor." The investigator stood completely still for a moment, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then, slowly, he knelt down to be at Lily's level. "Are you Clara Templeton?" he asked softly, directing the question to the feverish girl in Lily's arms. Clara opened her eyes with effort, and after a pause that seemed to last an eternity, gave a small nod. "Oh my God," Jack murmured. "I need to call her father immediately." "No!" Lily exclaimed, holding Clara tighter. "You don't understand. She can't go back home, not while she is there." "Who? What are you talking about?" Lily looked at the man in front of her, trying to decide if she could trust him. There was kindness in his eyes, a genuine concern she rarely saw in adults. But still, she hesitated. "The woman who was supposed to take care of her," she said finally. She hurts Clara. That's why Clara ran away." Jack frowned. "Ran away? But Rebecca said she disappeared at the park." "Rebecca lied," Lily said, the words pouring out like a dam breaking. "I saw it. I saw her throw Clara on the road and drive away. Clara didn't run away. She was abandoned." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Jack looked from Lily to Clara, then back to Lily, as if trying to process information that completely changed his understanding of the case. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" he asked carefully. "I saw it," Lily repeated, her voice small but determined. "And Clara told me about the other things. The burns, the bruises, the threats." Jack looked at Clara, who had closed her eyes again, but was still breathing with difficulty. "We need to get her to a hospital now," he said. "She's very sick." "But what if Rebecca finds out where she is?" Lily asked, panic returning to her voice. "What if she tries to hurt Clara again?" "I won't let that happen," Jack promised. And there was a firmness in his voice that made Lily believe him. "But first, we need to save her life. Then, we'll deal with Rebecca." As Jack carried Clara toward his car, Lily walked beside them, holding her sick friend's hand. She knew she had changed everything by revealing herself, but she also knew she had made the right choice. Clara needed more help than she could offer. And maybe, just maybe, the adults would finally believe the truth about what had happened. But as the car drove off toward the hospital, Lily couldn't help but wonder what kind of storm she had just unleashed, and whether she would be prepared to face it. The regional hospital in Cedar Creek had never seemed as intimidating to Lily as it did in that moment. The bright fluorescent lights, the strong smell of disinfectant, and the constant noise of hurried footsteps and medical equipment created an atmosphere that left her feeling completely lost. Jack had carried Clara directly to the emergency room, where a team of nurses immediately took control of the situation. Lily watched, feeling small and useless. As they placed Clara on a gurney and began asking technical questions she didn't understand. "Pneumonia," she heard one of the nurses say to the doctor who had been called. "High fever, respiratory distress, signs of dehydration." "How long has she been like this?" the doctor asked, directing the question to Jack. The investigator looked at Lily, recognizing that she was the only one who could answer. "The girl here took care of her. Lily, can you tell the doctor?" All eyes turned to her, and Lily felt her cheeks burn with nervousness. "It started 2 days ago," she said in a small voice. "First it was just a cough, then she got a fever." "Where were you during that time?" the doctor asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Lily hesitated, looking to Jack for guidance. The investigator gave her an encouraging nod. "Under the bridge," she murmured. "And before that, in the shack at the market." The doctor and nurses exchanged significant glances. It was obvious they were all thinking the same thing. 2 small children living in precarious conditions, without adult supervision, one of them seriously ill. "Doctor," Jack said, approaching, "I need to make an urgent call. This girl's father has been looking for her for weeks." While the doctor attended to Clara, Jack stepped away to make the call that would change everything. Lily could only hear fragments of the conversation, but enough to understand the emotional intensity on the other end of the line. "Mr. Arthur?" "Yes, she's alive." "At the hospital?" "No, sir, she wasn't lost. There are complications I need to explain in person." 20 minutes later, Lily heard rapid footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. A tall man burst through the emergency room door, his eyes desperately searching until they found the gurney where Clara was being treated. It was Arthur Templeton, and the expression of relief on his face was so intense that Lily felt tears well up in her own eyes. "Clara," he whispered, rushing to the gurney. "My girl, Daddy's here." Clara, even in her feverish state, recognized his voice. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw her father, a weak but genuine smile appeared on her lips. "Daddy," she murmured, holding out a small hand toward him. Arthur held his daughter's hand, as if it were the most precious thing in the world, tears streaming down his face without him caring who might see. "I looked for you everywhere," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I won't let you disappear again. I promise." It was at that moment that Clara did something that shocked everyone present. With a visible effort, she turned to look directly at Lily. "Lily took care of me," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "She saved me." Arthur followed his daughter's gaze and for the first time truly noticed the small girl standing in the corner of the room, watching the whole scene with large, worried eyes. "Are you Lily?" he asked, approaching her. Lily nodded nervously, not knowing what to expect. In her experience, when adults ask questions, it was rarely a good thing. "Thank you," Arthur said, and to Lily's complete surprise, he knelt down to be at her level. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." The sincerity in his voice made Lily feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the feeling that maybe not all adults were complicated and dangerous. But the atmosphere of relief was interrupted when Jack approached the group with a serious expression on his face. "Mr. Arthur, we need to talk," he said in a low voice. "There are things about Clara's disappearance that you need to know." Arthur looked alternately between the investigator and his daughter, clearly torn between the need to know the truth and the desire not to leave Clara's side for even a second. "I'll stay with her," one of the nurses offered, sensing his dilemma. "She'll sleep for a few hours because of the medication." Reluctantly, Arthur followed Jack to a private room, but not before asking Lily to accompany them. "She's the only witness to what really happened," the investigator explained. In the private room, Jack began to carefully recount what he had discovered. Arthur listened in growing silence, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, and finally to a cold, controlled rage. "Are you saying Rebecca lied about everything?" he asked when Jack finished. "That's what this girl claims to have seen," Jack replied, indicating Lily. "And there's physical evidence that corroborates her version." Arthur turned to Lily, his face grave but gentle. "Lily, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw that afternoon. It's very important." Lily took a deep breath and began to tell the whole story, from the moment she saw the SUV stop to when she decided to protect Clara. As she spoke, she noticed how Arthur's expression grew darker and darker. "And did Clara tell you about other things?" he asked carefully when she finished. Lily hesitated, remembering the promise she had made to Clara about keeping her secrets. But looking at the worried face of the girl's father, she realized that some secrets were too big for a child to carry alone. "She showed me the marks," she said finally, "on her arm, and she told me about the things that Rebecca did when you weren't home." The silence that followed was heavy. Arthur covered his face with his hands, clearly struggling with intense emotions. "How did I not see it?" he murmured. "How did I let this happen to my own daughter?" "Mr. Arthur," Jack said gently, "manipulators are very skilled at hiding their actions. They know exactly how to act, so they won't be discovered." "Where is Rebecca now?" Arthur asked, and there was something dangerous in his voice. "She's at home, as far as I know, still keeping up the charade that she's worried and helping with the search." Arthur stood up abruptly. "I'm going to confront her." "Sir, with all due respect, I think it's better to let the justice system handle this," Jack said. "We have enough evidence for a formal investigation." "Evidence? What evidence?" "Lily's testimony, the marks on Clara's body, and—" Jack paused. "I've discovered some financial inconsistencies I'd like to investigate further." "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Suspicious bank transactions in Rebecca's account, including a substantial withdrawal on the day Clara disappeared, almost as if she were preparing to flee." Arthur processed this information in silence. "You think she was planning to leave Cedar Creek?" "It's possible. Maybe she panicked when she realized Clara had truly disappeared after she abandoned her." At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was the nurse who was caring for Clara. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but the girl woke up and is asking for Lily." The three of them quickly went back to where Clara was. The girl looked a little better, her breathing more stable, but she was still clearly weak. "Lily," she said when she saw her, reaching out her hand, "will you stay with me?" Lily looked at Arthur, not knowing if it was appropriate. He nodded immediately. "Of course you can stay," he said. "In fact, I have a few questions for both of you." But before he could continue, his phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his expression hardened. "It's Rebecca," he said to Jack, "probably wanting to know if there's any news on the search." "Answer it," the investigator suggested. "But don't tell her about Clara yet. I want to see how she reacts when she finds out we found the girl." Arthur answered the call, putting it on speakerphone so the others could hear. "Arthur, darling," came Rebecca's voice, sweet and concerned. "Any news about our little one?" "Actually, yes," Arthur said, looking directly at Lily. "There are some very interesting things I found out today." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a second, but it was long enough for everyone in the room to realize Rebecca had caught something different in Arthur's tone. "What kind of things?" she asked, and now there was an almost imperceptible tension in her voice. "What kind of things?" Rebecca repeated, and even through the phone, everyone in the room could feel the rising tension in her voice. Arthur looked at Jack, who gestured for him to proceed carefully. "Clara, even in her weakened state, had squeezed her eyes shut upon hearing her stepmother's voice, and Lily instinctively moved closer to the gurney to hold her hand. "I found out some interesting information about the day Clara disappeared," Arthur said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "About financial transactions, for example." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough for everyone to hear the sound of accelerated breathing. I don't understand what you mean," Rebecca finally said, but her voice had completely lost its artificial sweetness. "What transactions?" "A $20,000 withdrawal from your savings account on the same day my daughter went missing." I can explain that," Rebecca stammered. "It was to hire more private investigators. I wanted to help find Clara." Jack shook his head negatively at Arthur, indicating that this excuse made no sense. $20,000 was far more than any local investigator would charge, and Rebecca had withdrawn the money before she had even reported the disappearance. "Interesting," Arthur said, "because according to the bank records, you made that withdrawal 3 hours before you called me saying Clara had disappeared." This time, the silence was absolute. Lily could see Arthur's face hardening with every second that passed without a response from Rebecca. "Rebecca," he said, "are you still there?" "Of course I am," she replied, but now her voice sounded completely different, cold and calculating. "Where are you going with these questions?" "I want to get to the truth about what really happened to my daughter." "I already told you the truth. We were at the park and she just vanished." It was then that Clara, who had been listening to everything in silence, opened her eyes and looked directly at the phone. "She's lying, Daddy," the girl said, her voice weak but clear. "She threw me on the road and drove away." The phone fell from Arthur's hand. On the other end of the line, they could clearly hear the sound of something being knocked over, followed by curses that made Clara flinch on the gurney. "Clara!" Rebecca exclaimed, and now there was no more pretense in her voice, just pure panic. "How? Where are you?" "We found our daughter," Arthur said, picking the phone back up, "and we found out what you really did." "You don't understand!" Rebecca screamed. "I had no choice. She was going to ruin everything." "Ruin what?" "She was going to tell about the corrections I gave her. She was going to make up stories and make you believe I was cruel." Lily felt nauseous hearing Rebecca refer to the abuse as corrections. Beside her, Clara had started to cry silently, and Arthur looked like he was struggling not to explode with rage. "Where are you now, Rebecca?" Jack asked, taking control of the conversation. "Who is this? Who's there with you?" "I'm the investigator who uncovered your lie," Jack said firmly, "and I suggest you come down to the hospital immediately to clear things up." "I'm not going anywhere. You have no proof of anything." "We have the testimony of the person who saw you abandon Clara," Arthur said, "and we have the marks on my daughter's body that you caused." What followed was a shriek of frustration so loud and desperate that it made several people in the hospital corridor look toward the room. Then they clearly heard the sound of the line being disconnected. "She hung up," Arthur said, looking at the phone as if he couldn't believe it. "And she's probably running now," Jack said, already taking out his own cell phone. "I need to alert the police." But before he could make the call, Arthur's phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Templeton?" came a gruff male voice that none of them recognized. "I have information about your wife." Jack gestured for Arthur to put it on speakerphone again. "Who are you?" Arthur asked. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that Rebecca Shaw is not who you think she is." "What do you mean?" "She's done this before. With her own son." The silence in the room was absolute. Lily didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could sense that some terrible revelation was being made. "What son?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. Michael Shaw, 7 years old. She abandoned him at a bus station in Charlotte 5 years ago. Told everyone he got lost. The boy was never found. Arthur sat down heavily in a nearby chair, as if his legs had stopped working. Do you have proof of this? I do, and more. Rebecca was being blackmailed for it. That's why she needed your money. Blackmailed by whom? By her ex-husband, Wayne Shaw. He found out what she did to the boy and was demanding money to keep quiet. Jack grabbed a piece of paper and started taking notes quickly. Where can we find this Wayne? You can't. He disappeared 3 days ago, right after the money was transferred to his account. How do you know all this? Arthur asked. Because I work at the bank where the transfers were made, and because... The voice hesitated for a moment. Because Michael Shaw was my nephew. The revelation hit everyone in the room like a bomb. Rebecca wasn't just a cruel stepmother who had abandoned Clara. She had a history of abandoning children. And now she was on the run again. Where is she now? Jack asked urgently. Trying to get to the bus station, but you have time. She had to go back home first to get documents and money she had hidden. How do you know that? Because I've been following her for 2 days, waiting for the right opportunity to expose the truth. When I heard you'd found the girl, I decided it was time. Jack stood up immediately. Mr. Arthur, I need to go after her before she leaves town. I'm going with you, Arthur said, but Jack shook his head. Better stay here with Clara. She needs you now, and I need someone who can formally identify the charges. As Jack hurried out of the room, Arthur approached the gurney where Clara lay. The girl looked exhausted, but her eyes were open and alert. Daddy, she said weakly, I tried to tell you about her, but I was scared. I know, my love, Arthur said, kissing his daughter's forehead, and I'm sorry I didn't realize. I will never let anyone hurt you again. It was then that Clara turned to Lily, who had remained quiet throughout the entire phone conversation. Lily saved me, she said to her father. If she hadn't taken care of me, I would have. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Everyone understood that if Lily hadn't found Clara on the road that afternoon, the consequences could have been much worse. Lily, Arthur said, turning to the girl who had protected his daughter, I need to know more about you. Where are your parents? The question Lily had always dreaded had finally come. She looked at Clara, then at Arthur, trying to decide if she could trust them with her own painful story. I don't have parents, she said simply. My grandma took care of me, but she passed away last winter. So, you're all alone? Lily nodded, expecting to see the same look of pity she always saw on adults' faces when they found out her situation. But what she saw on Arthur's face was something different. It was determination. Not anymore, he said firmly. As of today, you're part of this family. Before anyone could respond, Arthur's phone rang again. It was Jack. Mr. Arthur, the investigator said, and there was an urgency in his voice. We have a problem. Rebecca wasn't trying to run. What do you mean? She was coming back to the hospital, and according to security at the entrance, she just arrived. Arthur's blood ran cold. She's in the hospital. She is. And from what I could see on the security cameras, she didn't come alone. At that moment, the lights in the hallway flickered, and they could all hear a commotion building outside the room where they were. The commotion in the hallway intensified quickly. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, and the distinct sound of security being called echoed through the walls of the room where Arthur, Clara, and Lily were. Clara immediately shrank back on the gurney, her eyes filling with terror as she recognized the signs that something was very wrong. "Daddy!" she whispered, grabbing Arthur's arm with surprising strength for someone so frail. "She's come for me." Arthur glanced around the room, quickly assessing their options. There was only one door, and it led directly into the hallway where the chaos was erupting. The windows were too high to serve as an exit, and even if they weren't, Clara was too weak to be moved quickly. "Lily," he said in a low voice, "I need you to hide under Clara's bed, now." "But what about Clara?" Lily asked, reluctant to leave her friend. "I'll protect her, I promise." Lily slid under the hospital bed just as the room's door flew open violently. Rebecca stormed in like a hurricane, her blonde hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled, and her red eyes looking like she had been crying or drinking or both. But what shocked Arthur the most was seeing she wasn't alone. A burly man he didn't recognize followed her closely, and there was something in his posture that screamed danger. "Where is she?" Rebecca demanded, her eyes darting around the room like a wild animal. "Where is Clara?" "Rebecca," Arthur said, instinctively placing himself between her and the bed where his daughter lay. "You need to get out of here, now." "I'm not going anywhere without her," Rebecca shrieked. "She's my responsibility." "Responsibility?" Arthur's voice was filled with disbelief and contained rage. "You abandoned her on the side of the road like she was trash." It was then that Clara, mustering all the courage she could, spoke up from the bed. "I saw you," she said, her voice small but firm. "I saw you push me out of the car and drive away. And I saw you when you came back looking for me, but I had already run away." Rebecca's face turned visibly pale. "You don't understand, Clara. It was for your own good. You were going to ruin everything for me and your father." "Ruin what?" Arthur asked, taking a step forward. "She was going to tell lies about me, make you think I was a bad person." "They weren't lies," Clara said, and her words came out stronger this time. "You burned me with cigarettes. You broke my toys when I cried. You locked me in the closet when Daddy was away." "Shut up!" Rebecca screamed, lunging toward the bed. Arthur stopped her, holding her arms firmly. "Don't you come near her." It was then that the man accompanying Rebecca spoke for the first time. "Let her go," he said, and there was a clear threat in his voice. "Who are you?" Arthur asked, not releasing Rebecca. "Wayne Shaw," the man answered, "Rebecca's ex-husband, and I have some business to settle with you." Arthur felt a chill in his stomach. This was the man who had blackmailed Rebecca, the father of the boy she had abandoned years ago. "Business?" he asked, trying to buy time while he waited for hospital security to arrive. "My ex-wife owes me money," Wayne said, stepping closer. "A lot of money, and I found out that you're the source of that money. I don't owe you anything." "Oh, but you do. See, Rebecca has been using your money to pay me for years. Money she stole from your family account, and now that the well has run dry," he shrugged, "I need to find a new way to recoup my investments." Arthur finally understood the full picture. Rebecca hadn't just mistreated Clara and tried to run off with money. She'd been stealing from the family for years to pay off a blackmailer. "How much?" he asked through clenched teeth. 50,000 so far," Wayne said casually, "but with interest and emotional compensation for what I've had to endure keeping the secret about Michael. Let's say 100,000 would be a fair amount." "Michael?" Clara whispered from the bed. "Who's Michael?" No one answered immediately, but Rebecca began to sob violently. "He was my son," she said between tears. "My boy. I didn't want to. I didn't know what to do." "You abandoned him," Wayne said coldly, "just like you did with this one. It's what you do, Rebecca. When children become inconvenient, you get rid of them." Under the bed, Lily listened to everything in silence, her heart beating so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She was beginning to understand that the situation was far more complicated and dangerous than anyone had imagined. "I changed," Rebecca said, looking desperately at Arthur. "With Clara, I tried to be different, but she was so difficult. Always crying, always asking about her biological mother, always making me look inadequate. "So you decided to get rid of her too," Arthur said, his voice thick with disgust. "It was an impulse. I was driving. She was crying in the back seat, talking about how she wanted her real mom to come back, and I just lost it. And when you went back to look for her, I realized what I'd done. But when I got there, she was gone. I panicked and decided to pretend she'd gotten lost in the park." Clara was crying silently on the bed, not just for her own pain, but for the revelation that there was another boy who had suffered the same fate as her. "Where is Michael now?" Arthur asked. "Nobody knows," Wayne answered. "And that's exactly why Rebecca is going to keep paying. To make sure that information doesn't become public. That's blackmail. That's justice. My son disappeared because of her irresponsibility, and now I'm the one suffering the consequences." It was at this moment that Jack finally arrived, accompanied by 2 hospital security guards and a local police officer. "Mr. Templeton," he said, stopping abruptly when he saw the scene in the room. "Everything okay in here?" "Far from it," Arthur replied. "These 2 are trying to blackmail my family." Wayne turned to the newcomers with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There's no blackmail, just a family discussion." "A discussion where you barge into a hospital room and threaten a sick child?" the police officer asked. "Nobody threatened anyone," Rebecca lied. "I just want to see my stepdaughter." It was then that Clara, gathering all the courage she possessed, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's not my family," the girl said. "She hurt me, she burned me, she abandoned me on the road, and she did the same thing to another boy before me." The police officer looked from Rebecca to Wayne, then to Arthur. "Sir, would you like to file a formal complaint?" "I would," Arthur replied immediately. "Very well. Ms. Shaw, you and this gentleman need to accompany us to give statements." "Wait," Wayne said, and for the first time he seemed less confident. "Maybe we can reach an agreement here." "What kind of agreement?" Jack asked. "If Rebecca publicly confesses what she did, with Clara and with Michael, and returns the money she still has, I'll withdraw all my demands." Rebecca looked at him in horror. "You promised you'd never tell about Michael." "Circumstances have changed," he said coldly. "The truth is going to come out anyway now. At least this way you can try to minimize the consequences." It was then that a small but determined voice came from under the bed. "I saw it too," Lily said, crawling out from her hiding spot. Everyone in the room turned to look at the small girl who had been protecting Clara for weeks. "I saw when you abandoned Clara," Lily continued, looking directly at Rebecca. "I saw you push her out of the car. I saw you drive away and leave her all alone." The eyewitness confession was the final straw. Rebecca collapsed into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. "I tried to go back," she whispered. "When I realized what I'd done, I tried to go back and find her, but she was gone." "And then you decided to lie about everything," the police officer said. "I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe she'd gone home by herself, or that someone had helped her. When I saw she had really disappeared, I panicked." At that moment, a new voice joined the conversation. It was a nurse who had been monitoring Clara's vital signs. "Excuse me," she said, "but I have to ask you to keep your voices down. The patient needs to rest, and all this stress isn't helping her recovery." Arthur looked at his daughter and saw that Clara was exhausted, her eyes heavy with fatigue and medication. The girl had been through enough emotional trauma for one day. "Let's resolve this outside the room," he said, addressing the police officer. But before they could leave, Clara held her father's hand. "Daddy," she said weakly, "can Lily stay with me? She makes me feel safe." Arthur looked at the brave little girl who had saved his daughter, then at Rebecca and Wayne, who were being escorted out of the room. "Of course she can," he said. "Lily will stay here with you as long as you want." As the adults left to deal with the legal matters, Lily approached the bed and held Clara's hand. Is it over? Clara asked. Lily wasn't sure she could promise that, but looking at the determination on Arthur's face as he left the room, she felt for the first time in months that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was finally coming to an end. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the hospital, and the lives of everyone involved had changed drastically. Clara was recovering well from pneumonia, her breathing had normalized, and her fever had completely subsided. But the emotional scars were still visible. She would wake up with nightmares during the night and refuse to be left alone for even a few minutes. Lily hadn't left Clara's bedside since. Arthur had arranged for an extra bed in the room, new clothes for Lily, and everything she needed to be comfortable. But the girl who had lived on the streets was still adjusting to the idea that she could trust the kindness of others. "I don't get it," Lily said one morning, watching Arthur enter the room with breakfast for both girls. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Arthur stopped arranging the tray and looked at her with a serious but affectionate expression. "Because you saved my daughter," he said simply, "and because no child should have to go through what you've been through. But I'm not your real family." "Lily," Clara said from the next bed, "remember what you told me under the bridge. That family are the people who take care of each other?" Lily nodded, remembering the words she had used to comfort Clara during their most difficult moments. "Then you're my family," Clara concluded, "and Daddy's too." At that moment, Jack entered the room with a set of papers in his hands and an expression that mixed relief with concern. "How are my favorite girls today?" he asked, a fond nickname he had developed for Lily and Clara. "Better," Clara replied. "And Lily?" Everyone looked at Lily, who was nervously fiddling with the edge of her blanket. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice didn't sound convincing. Jack came over and sat in the chair beside her bed. "Lily, I need to talk to you about some important things, about your future." Fear immediately appeared in the girl's eyes. "Are they going to send me away?" "No," Arthur said quickly, "never. But there are some legal issues we need to sort out." Jack opened the papers he had brought. First, the good news. Rebecca confessed to everything, not just about abandoning Clara, but also about Michael and about stealing money from the family account for years. "And Wayne?" Arthur asked. "He also confessed to the blackmail. They will both face criminal charges, and it's very likely they'll be convicted." "Does that mean Clara is safe?" Lily asked. "Completely safe," Jack confirmed. "Rebecca will never be able to get near her again." Clara sighed in relief, and for the first time in days, Lily saw a genuine smile appear on her face. "But there are other matters," Jack continued. "About Lily." The girl's stomach churned. "What kind of matters?" "Well, technically you're a minor with no legal guardian. Normally that would mean you'd have to go to a shelter until a foster family was found." "No!" Clara exclaimed, grabbing Lily's hand. "She stays with me." "That's exactly the point we want to discuss," Arthur said. "I want to officially adopt Lily. I want her to become my daughter, just like Clara." Lily was completely silent for a moment, processing what she had just heard. Then tears began to stream down her face. "For real?" she whispered. "For real," Arthur confirmed. "If you want to, of course." "I do," Lily said quickly, then hesitated. "But what if I don't know how to be a daughter properly? I've never had real parents." "We'll learn together," Arthur said. "I'm also learning to be a better father after everything that's happened." Jack smiled, but then his expression turned serious again. "There's one more thing. About Michael." Everyone paid close attention. The case of the boy abandoned by Rebecca years ago had been weighing on everyone's mind since it was revealed. "We got a lead," Jack said. "A man in Charlotte contacted us. He and his wife found a lost boy at the bus station 5 years ago. A boy who matches Michael's description." "Is he alive?" Arthur asked. "He is. And he was raised by this family, who legally registered him after no one came looking for him. He's 10 now, well cared for and happy. And what will happen to him? Clara asked. That will depend on many factors. Wayne is still the biological father, but considering the circumstances, well, it's complicated. Lily listened in silence, thinking about the boy who had gone through the same trauma as Clara, but had been lucky enough to be found by good people. Does he know about what his mother did? She asked. Not yet, but eventually. He'll have to know the truth. It's part of the healing process. That afternoon, while Jack handled the legal paperwork, Arthur took the two girls for a walk in the hospital gardens. It was the first time Clara had been out of her room since she arrived, and she stayed close to her father and Lily, still nervous in open spaces. "Daddy," she said as they walked, "can I ask a question?" "Of course, my love. Why did you marry Rebecca? Didn't you realize she was bad?" The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. It was something he had asked himself 1,000 times since he found out the truth. "I was very sad after your birth mother left us," he said carefully. "Rebecca seemed kind and caring at first. She only showed who she really was after we got married. And you were always traveling for work," Clara added, not with accusation in her voice, just trying to understand. "I was, and I regret that very much now. If I had spent more time at home, I would have realized what was happening." Lily, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. "Sometimes adults are good at hiding who they really are." "How do you know that?" Arthur asked. "My grandma always said that some people wear masks. They show one face to some people and a different face to others." "Your grandmother was very wise," Arthur said. "She was, and she always said you could tell who was a good person by their eyes. Bad people have empty eyes, even when they're smiling." Clara thought about this for a moment. Rebecca always smiled when Daddy was around, but her eyes never smiled when she looked at me. "Exactly," Lily said. Arthur stopped walking and knelt to be at the girls' level. "Girls, I want you to know that I will never let anyone hurt you again. And if you ever think I'm doing something wrong, or if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, I want you to tell me immediately. Even if it's someone important," Lily asked. "Even if it's me," Arthur said firmly. "You can always question me. You can always tell me anything." That night, the two girls were lying in their beds, talking in whispers. "Lily," Clara said, "are you scared to live in a big house?" "A little," Lily admitted. "I've never lived in a real house. What if I break something expensive? Daddy won't get mad. He only gets mad about really important things." "Like what?" "Like when people hurt children," Clara said, her voice turning serious. "You saw how he was with Rebecca." Lily thought about it for a moment. "Clara, do you still have nightmares about her?" "Sometimes. But now when I wake up, you're here, and Daddy too. It makes the bad dreams go away." "I have nightmares too," Lily confessed. "About being alone again. About no one wanting me." "That's not going to happen," Clara said with conviction. "Daddy already said you're our family now, and Daddy always keeps his promises." 2 hours later, Arthur quietly entered the room to check if the girls were asleep. He found them lying side by side in Clara's bed, holding hands even in their sleep. For the first time in years, he felt that his family was complete. Not in the way he had imagined when he married Rebecca, but in a much more real and precious way. Two girls who had saved each other, who had shown more courage and compassion in their short lives than many adults show in entire decades. As he watched his daughters sleep peacefully, Arthur made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to ensure they had the happy and safe childhood they deserved. No matter how long it took, no matter what obstacles appeared. His family had been nearly destroyed by cruelty, but it had been rebuilt by love and courage, and this time he would let nothing and no one threaten it again. Arthur's house looked like a castle to Lily. Located in one of the most affluent areas of Cedar Creek, the two-story property had manicured gardens, a pool that sparkled under the Carolina sun, and huge windows that let natural light into every room. For a girl who had spent months sleeping in shacks and under bridges, it felt like an impossible dream. "This will be your room," Arthur said, opening the door to a spacious room with walls painted a soft yellow. "I thought of this color because you were always wearing that yellow shirt when we found you." Lily entered slowly, touching everything carefully, as if she were afraid of breaking something. The bed was larger than any surface she had ever slept on, with white sheets that smelled of laundry detergent and flowers. There was a wooden desk, an empty bookshelf waiting for books, and a wardrobe that seemed too big for the few clothes she owned. "It's very beautiful," she said in a low voice, "but it's too big for me." Clara, who had insisted on giving the house tour even while still recovering, laughed gently. "You'll get used to it. My rooms seemed giant too when I was little." "Do you want to see my room?" she asked, taking Lily's hand. Clara's room was down the hall, decorated in shades of pink and purple. But what caught Lily's attention most were the toys. Dolls, games, books, an elaborate dollhouse that looked handmade. "Rebecca broke some of them," Clara said casually, noticing Lily's gaze. "But Daddy bought new ones. And now we have twice the fun, because you'll play with me." I don't really know how to play," Lily admitted. "My grandma sometimes made corn husk dolls for me, but I never had real toys." "Then I'll teach you," Clara exclaimed, "and you can teach me about the medicinal plants your grandma taught you." In the days that followed, the adjustment was harder than anyone had imagined. Lily woke before sunrise, a habit from her time on the streets, and didn't know what to do with so much free time. She offered to help with household chores, insisting on washing her own clothes and obsessively tidying her room several times a day. "Lily," Arthur said one morning, finding her organizing her clothes drawer for the third time, "you don't have to do that." "But I have to help," and she insisted. "I can't just stay here doing nothing." "Why can't you?" The question left her confused. Because I've always had to work to have a place to stay." The answer broke Arthur's heart. He sat on the bed beside her. "Lily, you're not here because you work to earn it. You're here because you're our family now. But what if you change your mind? What if I do something wrong and you don't want me to stay anymore? That's not going to happen. Family isn't something you can lose by doing something wrong." But the words, however sincere, couldn't erase years of insecurity and survival instincts. The situation became more complicated when Lily started at the local school. Arthur had managed to get her a spot at the same private school Clara attended, a renowned institution that served the children of the region's most prominent families. On the first day, Lily stood out for all the wrong reasons. Her clothes, though new, were simpler than the other students. Her posture was alert and defensive, as if she were expecting trouble at any moment. And when the teacher asked about her family, she didn't know how to explain her complex situation. "My parents are." "It's complicated," she said, making the whole class laugh. During recess, the children asked cruel questions. "Is it true you used to live on the street? Why don't you have real parents? My mom said you were a beggar." Clara tried to defend her friend, but she was still weak from her recent pneumonia and couldn't command the respect of the older students. When Arthur came to pick up the girls at the end of the day, he found Lily crying silently on a school bench while Clara tried to console her. "What happened?" he asked, immediately concerned. "The kids were mean to Lily," Clara explained, her own eyes red with indignation. In the car, Lily finally let it all out. "They said I don't belong at that school, that I'm too different, and maybe they're right." "Lily, look at me," Arthur said, stopping the car. You belong anywhere. There are people who love you, and if those kids can't see how special you are, that's their problem, not yours. But I am different, she insisted. I know things they don't, like how to find medicinal plants and survive on my own, but I don't know the things they know, like how to use a computer or talk about expensive movies. And does that make you inferior? I don't know, does it? It makes you unique, Clara said from the back seat, and I like you exactly the way you are. That night, something happened that changed everything. Lily was helping Brenda, the family's cook, prepare chamomile tea for Clara when the older woman made a casual observation. You have a knack for medicinal plants, girl, she said. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. Who? Lily asked, interested. A very famous midwife here in the region, Frances. She knew everything about healing herbs. Lily felt a shiver run down her spine. Frances? Yes. Did you know her? She was my grandmother. Brenda dropped the spoon she was using to stir the tea. Your grandmother? Heavens, girl. Frances was respected by everyone here. She helped deliver half the children in Cedar Creek. She never told me that, Lily said, surprised. Of course not. Frances was humble, but everyone knew she had a special gift. When Arthur heard about the conversation, he decided to investigate further. The next morning, he and the girls visited the county clerk's office to look for records about Lily's grandmother. What they discovered was astounding. Frances Shaw wasn't just a respected midwife. She had owned a small, successful natural products pharmacy decades ago. When she passed away, she had left no will, and her properties had been seized by the county for lack of known heirs. This means Lily is entitled to these properties, the clerk explained, if we can prove she is the sole living heir. What properties? Arthur asked. The old pharmacy in the historic downtown and a plot of land on the outskirts of town. They aren't fortunes, but they have considerable value. The news left Lily confused. My grandma had properties. Why did she never tell me? Maybe she wanted to protect you, Clara suggested. Or maybe she thought you were too young to understand. That afternoon, they visited Frances's old pharmacy. The building had been abandoned for years, with broken windows and weeds growing at the entrance, but through the dirt and decay, you could still see the remnants of a once thriving business. Look, Lily said, pointing to a faded sign above the door. St. Francis Pharmacy, natural and medicinal products. St. Francis, Arthur murmured. Like your grandmother, Frances. When they entered the abandoned building, Lily felt something strange. A familiarity she couldn't explain. There were empty shelves where natural remedies used to sit, an old counter where her grandmother probably served customers, and in the back, a small room that seemed to have been used for preparing the medicines. I remember this place, Lily said suddenly. What do you mean? Arthur asked. Grandma used to bring me here when I was very little. I thought we were just visiting, but now I remember her working with plants back here. It was then that Clara made a discovery. Behind a pile of old wood, she found a small, dust-covered chest. There's something here, she said, trying to drag it out. Arthur helped pull the chest into the light. It was a simple but well-preserved wooden box with a small lock that had rusted over time. Carefully, he forced the lock until it gave way. Inside, they found treasures that explained a lot about Lily's past. There were handwritten notebooks with recipes for natural remedies, old photographs of the pharmacy in operation, letters from people thanking Frances for her care, and a specific letter addressed to my little granddaughter Lily for when you're old enough to understand. With trembling hands, Lily opened her grandmother's letter. My dearest Lily, she read aloud, if you are reading this, it means I'm no longer here to explain our family to you. I know I always raised you to be strong and independent, but I want you to know that you come from a line of respected healers, your great-grandmother, your great-great-grandmother. We all had the gift of healing with plants, and you have that gift too. Tears began to stream down Lily's face as she continued to read. I left this pharmacy and the land for you, because I know that one day you will want to help people as I always did. But don't rush. Live your childhood first, learn about the world, and when you are ready, come back here. This place is waiting for you. When Lily finished reading, the silence in the abandoned building was complete. Finally, she looked at Arthur and Clara. She knew, she whispered. Grandma knew I would need a purpose in life. And now you have one, Clara said. You can restore this place and help people like your grandmother did. Arthur placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, but only when you want to, and only when you're ready. For now, you are still a child who deserves to play and study and be happy. That night, Lily slept clutching her grandmother's letter to her chest. For the first time since she could remember, she knew exactly who she was and where she came from. And more importantly, she knew she had a future ahead of her, not just as the girl Arthur had adopted, or the friend Clara loved, but as the heir to a healing tradition that went back generations. The discovery changed everything, but in a way she was only just beginning to comprehend. 2 months had passed since the discovery of Lily's inheritance, and the family's life had found a more stable rhythm. The girl had adapted better to school after Arthur spoke with the principal about bullying, and some of the more curious, less cruel classmates had started asking genuine questions about her skills with medicinal plants. But it was during an ordinary weekend that everything changed again. Lily was in the garden, teaching Clara how to identify different types of herbs, when Brenda came running from the kitchen with a panicked look on her face. "Girl!" she shouted to Lily. "I need your help. It's Mrs. Mary from across the street." "What happened?" Lily asked, immediately dropping the plants she was showing Clara. "She fell down the stairs and is bleeding badly. They've already called an ambulance, but it's taking a while, and she says she's in terrible pain." Lily didn't hesitate. She ran inside, grabbed the small pouch where she kept some medicinal plants she had collected from her grandmother's land, and followed Brenda to the neighbor's house. The scene she found was frightening. Mrs. Mary, a 70-year-old woman, was lying on the living room floor with a deep gash on her forehead, clearly in great pain. Her husband, Mr. Joe, was pacing nervously around the room, repeating that the ambulance should have been there 15 minutes ago. "Mrs. Mary," Lily said, kneeling beside the injured woman, "can I help while we wait for the doctor?" The woman opened her eyes and recognized her. "You're Francis's granddaughter, aren't you? The girl Mr. Arthur adopted." "That's me, and my grandma taught me a few things that might help with the pain." Quickly, Lily examined the injuries. The wound on her forehead was bleeding a lot, but it didn't seem deep enough to be dangerous. The bigger problem was that Mrs. Mary was clearly in shock and in intense pain. From her pouch, Lily took out dried lemon balm and mint leaves, which she crushed between her hands to release their natural oils. "Smell this," she said, holding the herbs near Mrs. Mary's nose. "It will help with the nervousness." The effect was almost immediate. The woman's agitated breathing began to normalize, and her panicked expression visibly lessened. "How does she know how to do that?" Mr. Joe murmured, impressed. Meanwhile, Lily had found some plantain leaves in the neighbor's garden, a plant her grandmother had taught her was excellent for stopping bleeding. She carefully chewed the leaves to release their juice and applied it to the gash on Mrs. Mary's forehead. "It's going to sting a little," she warned, "but it will stop the bleeding." When the ambulance finally arrived 15 minutes later, the paramedic was surprised to find the patient calm and the bleeding controlled. "Who did this dressing?" he asked, examining Lily's work. "It was the girl," said Mr. Joe, pointing to Lily. "She's only... How old are you again, dear?" 8, Lily replied shyly. The paramedic looked at her with a mixture of surprise and respect. "Where did you learn this?" "My grandmother taught me. She was a healer. Well, you probably saved this lady from losing a lot more blood, and you definitely kept her calm until we got here. When they returned home, Clara was eager to hear everything that had happened. "Did you really heal Mrs. Mary?" she asked, impressed. "I didn't heal her," Lily corrected. "I just helped until the real doctor arrived. Grandma always said medicinal plants are to help, not to replace doctors." Arthur, who had arrived home from work in the middle of the commotion, sat with the two girls on the porch. "I'm proud of you, Lily," he said, "but I'm also worried. You're too young to have so much responsibility on your shoulders." "But I like helping people," she protested, "and I know I can do it safely." "I know, but I want you to have time to be a kid too." It was at that moment that Jack appeared, driving up the road to the house. He had been visiting them regularly since the case, keeping in touch and helping with legal matters related to Lily's adoption. "I hear we had a little healer in action today," he said, greeting everyone. "News travels fast," Arthur laughed. "In a town the size of Cedar Creek it does, and actually that's what I came to talk about." Jack sat down and took some papers out of his briefcase. "Lily, remember when we found out your grandmother had properties? Well, I've managed to finalize all the paperwork. Officially, you are now the owner of the old pharmacy and the land." "Is that good?" Lily asked, still not fully understanding the implications. "It's great," Jack said, "but it also brings some decisions you'll need to make." "What kind of decisions?" Arthur asked. "The town of Cedar Creek is interested in buying the land to build a new health center. They're offering a very good price." "And the pharmacy?" Clara asked. "There's a group of investors who want to turn it into a tourist restaurant. They're also offering good money." Lily was silent, processing the information. Finally, she spoke. "What if I don't want to sell?" "Then you don't sell," Arthur said immediately. "The decision is yours." "But I'm just a kid. How can I own property?" "Technically, until you turn 18, I would be the legal guardian responsible for managing your assets," Arthur explained. "But all the important decisions would be yours." Lily thought about what she had experienced that day with Mrs. Mary, about the feeling of satisfaction she felt helping someone using the knowledge her grandmother had passed down. "I want to restore the pharmacy," she said finally. "Lily, that would be very expensive and complicated," Jack warned. "Not to operate now," she clarified, "but I want it to be restored for when I grow up. I want it to one day be a place where people can come for help again." "And the land?" Arthur asked. Lily looked at Clara, then at Arthur. "Can I use the money from selling the land to restore the pharmacy?" "You can," Jack confirmed. "In fact, that would be a very smart decision." "Then that's what I want to do." That night, the two girls were lying in Clara's bed, looking out the window at the stars shining over Cedar Creek. "Lily," Clara said, "don't you think it's weird how our lives have changed?" "Changed how?" "A few months ago, I was suffering with Rebecca, and you were alone on the street. And now we're sisters with a dad who loves us, and you're planning to restore your grandmother's pharmacy." Lily thought about it for a moment. Sometimes bad things happen to lead us where we need to be. "What do you mean?" "If Rebecca hadn't abandoned me on the road, I never would have found you. And if you hadn't gotten sick, Jack never would have found us under the bridge. And if we hadn't been found, you never would have found out about your inheritance," Clara added. "Exactly. Grandma always said that everything in nature has a purpose, even when we can't see what it is." The next day, something unexpected happened that would test this philosophy. Lily was at school when she was called to the principal's office. She found Arthur there, with a worried expression on his face. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "Lily," the principal said gently, "we received a call from social services. There are some issues with your adoption that need to be clarified." Lily's heart pounded. "What kind of issues?" "Apparently, someone has contested the process," Arthur explained, clearly annoyed. Someone has alleged that you have living relatives who should have been consulted before the adoption. But I don't have any living relatives, Lily said, confused. That's what we thought. But the person making the claim says she's your grandmother's cousin and that she has legal rights to your custody. Lily's world began to crumble again. After months of finally feeling safe and loved, the possibility of being torn from her new family was terrifying. What does this mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It means we'll have to go to the courthouse on Monday for a hearing, Arthur said. But I want you to know that we are going to fight for you. I won't let anyone tear our family apart. What if the judge decides she has more right to me? Arthur knelt in front of Lily and held her hands. Then we will prove that you are better off with us, that you are loved and cared for and happy. But as they left the school, Lily couldn't help but think that perhaps the happiness she had found was too temporary to be real. The fight for her to remain with the family she had chosen was just beginning. Monday arrived with a light rain that gave Cedar Creek a melancholy air. Lily had slept poorly all night, waking up several times from nightmares about being taken away from her new family. Clara had insisted on sleeping in the same bed with her, offering the silent comfort of her presence. At the town courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Besides Arthur, Lily, and Jack, there were Miss Connie from the market, Brenda, Mr. Joe, and Mrs. Mary, who had fully recovered from her fall, and several other people Lily had helped with her knowledge of medicinal plants over the past few months. Why did so many people come? Lily asked, surprised and moved. Because they all want to testify for you, Arthur explained. They want to tell the judge how you've been helping the community. When they entered the hearing room, Lily saw for the first time the woman who claimed to be her relative. She was a woman of about 50, well-dressed, with carefully styled hair, and an expression that tried to look concerned but couldn't hide a certain coldness in her eyes. That's Patricia Shaw, Jack whispered. She claims to be your grandmother's cousin. Lily watched the woman carefully, trying to find some family resemblance or recognition, but she felt nothing. There was something in Patricia's posture that unpleasantly reminded her of Rebecca, a poorly disguised falseness that made her stomach churn. The judge, an elderly man with a kind but serious demeanor, called the hearing to order. We are here today to determine the best interests of the minor, Lily Shaw, he began. Mrs. Shaw, you may present your claim. The woman stood and spoke in a voice that sounded studiedly emotional. Your Honor, Frances Shaw was my dear cousin. When I learned she had passed away and left an orphaned granddaughter, I was devastated. I tried to find the child for months, but she had disappeared. Now I discover she is being raised by strangers when she should be with me, with her real family. And why did you not claim custody before? The judge asked. Because I didn't know of the girl's existence, Patricia lied smoothly. Frances and I had a falling out in recent years, a foolish family squabble that I now deeply regret. Lily felt a rage build in her chest. Her grandmother had never mentioned any family squabble, and she certainly would have told her about a cousin if one existed. When it was Arthur's turn to speak, he rose with dignity. Your Honor, I found Lily under exceptional circumstances. She had saved my daughter and cared for her for weeks, showing extraordinary courage and compassion. In the months she has lived with us, she has blossomed. She is doing well in school, has developed healthy friendships, and is exploring the talents she inherited from her grandmother. What talents? The judge asked, interested. It was then that Mrs. Mary asked for permission to speak. Your Honor, this girl saved my life 2 weeks ago, she said, telling the whole story of the accident and how Lily had used her knowledge to help her. She's a little folk healer, added Miss Connie. Just like her grandmother, she has the gift of healing. Patricia seemed annoyed by these testimonies. Those are just superstitions, she said dismissively. The girl needs a proper education, not these old beliefs. It was that sentence that sealed her fate. Lily stood up, even without permission, and looked directly at the woman. My grandmother always told me that respecting family traditions was one of the most important things, she said, her voice small but firm. She never spoke of you, and if you were cousins, you would know that she would never call her knowledge superstitions. The judge looked from Lily to Patricia. Can you prove your kinship with Francis Shaw? I have some documents at home, Patricia stammered. What documents, specifically? It was at that moment that Jack stood up. Your Honor, I took the liberty of investigating the genealogical records of the Shaw family. Francis Shaw was an only child, as were her parents. There is no cousin named Patricia in the entire family tree. A murmur went through the room. Patricia turned visibly pale. Furthermore, Jack continued, I discovered that Mrs. Shaw has made several attempts to claim inheritances from deceased individuals in recent years, always alleging kinship that later proved to be false. That's a lie, Patricia shouted, completely losing her composure. Are you aware that attempting to defraud the judicial system is a crime? The judge asked sternly. In that moment, the whole truth came out. Patricia had heard about Lily's inheritance through town gossip and decided to try to take possession of the assets by claiming false kinship. She had no real interest in caring for Lily. She only wanted to control her properties. Case closed, the judge declared. The adoption of Lily Shaw by Arthur Templeton is confirmed and validated. The plaintiff will be investigated for attempted fraud. The explosion of joy in the room was instantaneous. Clara ran to hug Lily. Arthur wrapped them both in his arms, and all the friends who had come to testify celebrated the victory. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. 3 months later, during Cedar Creek's traditional strawberry festival, something extraordinary happened. In the same spot where Lily used to sell fruit, where it all began, Arthur officially inaugurated the Francis Shaw Welcome Center for Vulnerable Children. The building had been constructed with the money from the sale of Lily's land, and it was a beautiful, welcoming place where orphaned or mistreated children could find temporary safety while adoptive families were found. This center, Arthur said during the inauguration speech, is a tribute to all the brave children who, like my daughter Lily, survived on their own and deserved to have someone care for them. Next to the center, Francis's old pharmacy had been completely restored. Although it wasn't yet operating commercially, after all, Lily was only 8. The building served as a museum of traditional medicine and a place where Lily could study and practice her grandmother's teachings. When I grow up, Lily said during an interview with the local newspaper, I want this place to be a real pharmacy again, where people can come for help like they did with my grandmother. Aye, and what would you say to other children who are going through difficult times? The journalist asked. Lily thought carefully before answering. I would say that even when everything seems really bad, there's always hope. Sometimes help comes from where you least expect it, and that taking care of each other is the most important thing we can do. Clara, who was standing beside her sister during the interview, added, and that family isn't just who you're born with. Family are the people who choose to love each other. That night, during the festival, Lily and Clara walked together through the streets of Cedar Creek, watching the colorful lights and listening to the music echoing from the main square. Are you happy? Clara asked. I am, Lily replied without hesitation. Happier than I ever thought I could be, even with everything that happened, with Rebecca, with that woman trying to take you away. Especially because of those things, Lily said. They showed me how important it is to have people who really care about you. They stopped in front of the old house where Rebecca had lived with Arthur and Clara. It was now empty, with a for sale sign out front. I still have nightmares about her sometimes, Clara admitted. Me too, Lily said, but then I remember she can't hurt anyone anymore, and that we managed to be stronger than her evil. 5 years later, during another strawberry festival, Michael Shaw, the boy Rebecca had abandoned years before, visited Cedar Creek for the first time. Now 15, he had grown into a confident, well-adjusted young man, thanks to the care of the family that had found and raised him. "Thank you for exposing the truth about my birth mother," he said to Lily and Clara. "For years, I blamed myself for being abandoned. Now I know it wasn't my fault." "It never was," Lily said. "Some adults make bad choices, but that has nothing to do with us." That day, the 3 children who had been hurt by Rebecca's cruelty met as survivors who had found healing and purpose in their lives. Michael was studying psychology and wanted to work with traumatized children. Clara had become an active advocate for children's rights, giving talks in schools about bullying and abuse. And Lily, now 13, was already known throughout the region as a young healer, helping people with her traditional knowledge while studying to one day become a licensed pharmacist. "You know what I think?" Clara said, as the 3 of them watched children playing in the playground of the Francis Shaw Welcome Center. "What?" Lily and Michael asked. "I think our story isn't about how we were hurt. It's about how we chose to use our pain to help others." Lily looked at the center that bore her grandmother's name, at the restored pharmacy that would one day serve the community again, at the children who now had a safe place to stay when they needed it. "Grandma always said that everything in life has a purpose," she said. "I think our purpose was to find each other and create something good out of something bad." As the sun set over Cedar Creek that night, 3 young people who had been broken by cruelty but healed by love looked to the future with hope, knowing they had transformed their pain into a force for good. And in the old pharmacy, among the shelves that would one day hold natural remedies again, the teachings of Francis Shaw lived on through her granddaughter, who had learned the most important lesson of all, that true love has the power to heal any wound and transform any life. The suffering had ended. The healing had begun. And a new generation of healers was ready to spread hope wherever they went. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.